We're going to talk about dirt today. This is going to be really cool.
What mistakes have you seen contractors make time and again over your 35 years?
The problem is,
what's the worst case of heave you've seen in a home or business structure?
Personally, I've seen homes heave as much as...
What do you think the industry can do to elevate itself?
What's that biggest misconception that they have about foundation repair and damage as a homeowner?
The first mistake that most homeowners make is...
What caused you to come up with SpatialVision, and what is it?
This eliminates 90% of all problems because...
What's the biggest transition you've been seeing with SpatialVision?
We've had sales guys increase their sales by as much as 30% by using this.
Welcome to Beers with Contractors.
All right, Lord Terry, how you doing, sir?
Doing good, Will. Yourself?
I'm doing good, man. We had a seamless setup today. I better knock on wood, buddy. No technical difficulties. They're
Careful
coming.
of what you speak, my friend.
That's right. Well, tradies out there, thank you for coming to another episode of Beers with Contractors. Man, we are getting to the end of May now. It's awesome. You know, obviously we're through. We're on the eve of the famous Father's Day holiday.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be great. You know, it's summertime, so we are in the grind of the summer heat.
Yeah.
Loving it. So, well, first off, you're very well dressed today. Obviously, we had a media day today where Terry and I showed up to get in front of the news stations to do an interview about our construction camp for kids.
Yep.
And they took a look at us and they're like, yeah, we're going to interview these other 6 people.
They definitely had the talent in front of the camera, and we stayed well behind.
You know, it was a little weird that you and I dressed up more like the Dumb and Dumber tuxedo scene. That's probably what got us out of the gig, obviously. But, you know, it was good. Let other people, you know, go through that. So we share the glory.
Now, that's an amazing feat for those young people to be starting their career path into the construction trades and industry, and I wish them nothing but the best.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We ended up, just so everybody knows, we have a high school internship program where we take high school interns, place them into paid internships in the industry, and out of that we had an 80% completion rate, and out of those students we had over 55% actually get jobs in the industry, which was cool because, like, in high school athletics, and Terry, I know you saw one of these. I was not available for either of these, but
Right.
where it's common you have a signing day, right?
Yep.
Where a kid is signing up for a university for athletics and things like that. So they turned it on its head and they had a signing day for kids signing up to receive jobs from the construction industry. Dude, super cool. And you were there for one of them. What was it like, Terry?
Oh, it was great. I mean, the contractor came out. They presented the young man with safety vest that was branded, a hard hat that was branded. You know, they shook his hand, gave him his certificate, and that young man kept that safety vest on the rest of the day. I know it. You know, he was smiling ear to ear because he's coming out of high school. He's got a full-time job and he's got a direction, and it was beautiful to see.
Yeah, dude, awesome stuff. So, hey, so I know we briefly talked about this today at Media Day, off camera, thank goodness.
Yep.
Have you been reading up on this 32-hour work week where it's a bill introduced by the Senate, and ironically it was presented to the floor by Senator Butler and then also Senator Sanders, Bernie Sanders, one independent, one Democrat, trying to institute a 32-hour work week, which would cause overtime to start kicking out at 32, which is weird because it's supported by Trump because he wants to do, you know, no overtime or no taxes on overtime. Did you read up on that after we talked about it?
Yeah, I got into it a little bit. You know, it has been so long since I've been on a 40-hour work week. I can't really imagine what that would be like. I do know that talking to a lot of young people, you know, they look forward to that overtime kicking in. And so it would be of benefit for them. But there's going to be a significant cost to business owners and business in general.
Well, it's funny. I know you're coming from the world of academia, Terry, so I know you'll never hit the overtime threshold. Because, I mean, you're typically put, what 23 hours a week in tops, maybe?
We'll work a hard 35.
That's not including lunch, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
No, What is really enjoyable is working with some of these young people. And what happens is as soon as they go from hourly to salary, because they get that promotion, and then you just kind of see the life drain from their eyes when they understand they're working 50 hours a week and it's the same.
Yeah. Well, I thought the rollout of this bill was kind of interesting. So essentially this bill states that they want to institute 32-hour work week. So time and a half starts kicking in. Of course, that affects certain states like California, some areas in New York where you have daily and 12-hour overtime daily, double overtime, it's commonly referred to. But rather than just saying, hey, the change is now, they want to take 4 years and roll it back 2 hours a year until it eventually reaches 32, which is interesting because that's a gradual increase or a gradual decrease in the work week threshold. But like, talk about bad timing, because you got a president that supports it, but you got two really, independent Democrats pushing for it. And, you have a Senate and Congress controlled by Republicans. So it's like, no matter what they want, they're just always going to butt heads. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because, as it works in construction, man, like overtime is a common problem, which we talked about a lot in our last episode with Drake, which you guys can go back and check that out. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see. It's unlikely to unfold, but we'll see how it plays out. So
the other part of that is, if you look at it, it now creates a 4-day work week, because you have 4 8-hour days at this point in time. You're shifting everyone to that 4-day work week and 3-day weekends every week.
yeah, well, hell, shameless plug. My guys take 4-day work weeks anyway, but that's the secret of performance pay. They want them 3-day weeks or weekends. Hey, I'm going to shift the conversation, Terry, to something way more important.
Good.
We're going to talk about dirt today. I know. And to our 5 listeners out there, I know you're excited, but actually this is going to be really cool. On today's episode, I'm excited because this guy is a pioneer in really not only the foundation repair industry, but the engineering industry and just the home inspection industry. And he's known, get this, Terry, I love the branding, the Dirt Whisperer. And by the way, that is his name. People know him all around the country for this. With over 35 years of hands-on experience, Bob has performed and supervised more than 10,000 home foundation investigations. He's not only an accomplished author of a foundation repair secrets book, he's also a patented inventor. He holds multiple patents, including what we're going to talk about today. SpatialVision is a kick-ass software. It's awesome. And this tool revolutionizes how inspectors map 3D renderings of movement in homes.
Okay.
And they bring clarity to and precision to really an often mistrained industry, and where we're putting people out in the field and they don't really know what they're looking at. But it's also just bringing clarity to the end customer, the homeowner, too. And it's just such a super high value. So I'm excited to introduce my friend, longtime friend, Bob Brown with SpatialVision. Bob, welcome to the party, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hey, I'll just give you my 2 cents. One of the things we toyed around when I owned Arizona Foundation Solutions was having 2 crews, because underpinning crew has about $250,000 in equipment. So we would have one crew at the beginning of the week, get their 40 hours, and the other crew at the end of the week. And we would have that equipment working all the time. So just food for thought. It might not be a bad idea in the end, right?
Nope.
Yeah. Well, and I forgot. You told me about that because you were like, the equipment never gets tired. So have them clean it up and hand it to the other guys, and each crew gets like their 3-day weekend or 4-day weekend, and off they go.
Great.
Still putting in the money.
Yep.
So, which is a great, segue into obviously your experience, Bob, because you come with decades, literally. And we didn't mention in this, like, you've grown a successful business in the home service space, and you've sold it, and you can't seem to take off. I don't know why you can't just retire like the wise man that we know you are, but let's just start back. Like, you call yourself the Dirt Whisperer. I want to know where the name came from and what really drew you into niching down in kind of this world of geotechnical knowledge over the last several years.
Yeah. Well, I think the name The Dirt Whisperer came from one of my employees. I think it was our commercial estimator at the time, Brent McIver. He kind of started talking about it and everybody else liked it and it stuck. So it wasn't even my idea. But yeah, so dirt, how did I get involved in dirt? You know, when I first started doing foundation repair back in about 2000, before 2000, I was doing kind of more concrete repairs, mud jacking, that kind of stuff. But I was contacted by a national supplier who said, hey, we're looking for an installer. And I said, yeah, I'm sure, why not? You know, now I have degrees in architecture and in finance. So I knew a lot of engineers and I listened to my supplier because that's all I knew at the time. But I started seeing things that didn't make sense. Since I knew a lot of engineers, I took them out to lunch, picked their brains, read a lot of books. Pretty soon I started to realize that there's some problems in the industry. And so that's when I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to do things a little differently. And I started up an engineering division of the company and it grew to like 15 people. It was a pretty decent sized part of the company. The way we did it is if the salesman would go out to the home and if there was indications of vertical movement from soils, then they would sell engineering services. He would be off the job and the engineering team would send out their people to gather the data, bring it back to the engineer who would then write a report, seal it, make recommendations, give it back to the salesman, and the salesman would then go back to the homeowner and say, here's what the engineer recommended. And people liked that because they knew that the salesman really had no dog in the fight. You know, he wasn't trying to recommend things to get a big commission for himself, right? It was the engineer that was recommending it, and they liked that. So that's kind of where we ended up today. Now, after I sold the company that bought us ended up firing the whole division, and so that whole thing went down the tubes. But fact of the matter is that's kind of where I'm at today. I still believe that engineers are really properly qualified to really understand this better than the average person.
Mm-hmm. You know, Bob, one thing that comes to mind is you've been in the industry for so long. One question I would ask is what mistakes have you seen contractors make time and again over your 35 years?
Well, most contractors do a really good job. We're talking about contractors, foundation repair contractors. They do a pretty good job of installing the product. And the products themselves are really good products. They're way over-engineered. The problem is, how do you decide where the piers go or if they're needed? One side, too many, too little. Maybe it's heave and they don't need piers at all, right? Maybe it's expansive soil heave and it's heaving up in the middle and it looks like it's settling on the edge when in fact it's not even settling at all. The thing that I discovered is that a lot of the national suppliers, well, they don't have any products to offer for expansive soil heave, so they don't teach the salesman about it. If you go to a seminar put on by any of the national suppliers, they're not going to talk about expansive soil heave. And as a result, the salesmen don't learn anything about it, you know, and so it goes unnoticed. Now, for the salesmen who maybe have been around a long time and understand it a little better, they're not going to be really motivated to talk about it because they don't have anything to offer for it. And if it's all heave and no settlement, they're going to go home hungry. So, you know, I hear the kind of logic of, well, it looks like it's heave, but could be settlement. Let's just put some piers in to make sure, you know. That's that kind of business. And those are the kinds of mistakes I've seen contractors make.
So, Bob, this is an important thing because you and I have had this conversation about heave. And I don't know why there's so many people who are like, oh, we don't have that here.
Yeah.
But I mean, you and I have exchanged some crazy stories about heave. Like, what's the worst case of heave you've seen in a home or business structure in the last 20 years?
Well, personally, I've seen homes heave as much as 10 inches.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With no settlement involved, all heave. Now, I've heard in Colorado that there have been cases where there's been as much as 24 inches heave. Mm-hmm. So people don't realize what a powerful force it is. I mean, we're talking about, 24,000 PSI. It'll break concrete, bend steel. You cannot restrain it. You cannot put in a helical pier system to try to hold it down. That will not work. It'll tear the helical pier system apart. Won't work.
Yeah. And I've heard that, like, even if you try to bolt it, like, it'll just shear the bolts, like the amount of force around all of that. It's just like, it's nuts. But yeah, so let's rewind this a little bit because you mentioned that. Obviously, you have suppliers, they want to sell their product. And when everything's a nail, is that the saying, Terry? Farden, bring your education to the level. When you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right?
Exactly. You got to pound it.
Abraham Maslow said that when your only solution is a hammer, all your problems start looking like nails.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, all right. So obviously they want to sell that product. And then, so they're going to train against it. So the ethical contractor for a second, like first off, we're going to get into SpatialVision here in a second, but just at a basic training level, what's one of the major things that somebody can look for to be like, hey, we're going to train on heave, despite what everybody says, because we think it's important and it's obvious in our area. What are some of the things that they should have tools-wise, that they should have training-wise to be like, this is how we diagnose it?
Well, the table stakes, the very basics, and there's a lot of things. There's actually 16 things that I go through in my book, 16 areas of observations that need to be looked at. But the table stakes are a floor level survey and a damage map. Now, when I say a floor level survey, I'm also talking about you can't just have a bunch of numbers on a floor plan. That doesn't really help you recognize patterns at all. You need to recognize what certain topo line patterns look like. Settlement on the edge versus heave in the middle. Is it near damages as well in the high spots, or is it damages in the low spots? Is it on the sunny side of the house? Is it on the shady side of the house? What's the drainage look like? You could go through a gazillion things, but the table stakes are a good 3D topo map and a damage map overlaid on top of it.
So one thing I'm looking at, Bob, is, the foundation repair business has its bad actors out there, right? So what do you think the industry can do to elevate itself and bring in those ethical standards that you would expect?
Yeah, interesting, because I just gave a 1-hour talk at the National Foundation Repair Association on this subject, and I went through the 16 things. I think everybody was a little bit dismayed. But, the point is they have a designation called a Certified Foundation Repair Specialist. I've been one for 20 years or almost 20 years. And they're talking about revamping the test and the requirements and all that. And they've asked me to be a part of that and to help with it. So in essence, that's part of what I'm trying to do to make the industry function a little better. Because here's the truth, guys. If we don't do it ourselves from the inside, guess what? Somebody else is going to do it from the outside. It ain't going to be nearly as much fun.
No. Well, you've also got like this end-to-end approach, Bob, that I really like. So like you've got the training, and I love this because I was like, we need to do a certification training. And we've got an hour and a half time block. And you're like, you're not even going to get through one step.
It took us 6 weeks to train our guys, 6 weeks every day.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, you look at an engineer that's getting a stamp. I mean, there's easily 4,000 hours in just
easily
inspection time right there. So it's like, yeah, that should be important for the legacy of the company. And I know you're seeing it in the world with private equity coming into the space. It's like, no, get people out in the field selling jobs because we've got shareholders and things like that we need to get returns on. Not like, let's create something that's going to be everlasting, right? But you've attacked it from that end on the certifications. I want to dig in more to that here in a second, but you also wrote this foundation repair book, Foundation Repair Secrets, towards homeowners to close that gap.
Right.
So what's that biggest misconception that they have about foundation repair and damage as a homeowner that isn't translating over?
Tradies, running your small business can be demanding. You got suppliers you got to work with. You're managing crews. Hell, you're chasing sales. It's a lot to take in. Listen, if you want to grow your business, you got to stop working in it and you got to start working on it. So that's where my friends at Foundation Rescue Supply come in. You're not just getting foundation repair products and waterproofing products and air quality control products. With their nationwide distribution, you're getting a partner who knows how to help you scale. And that's why I use them. The Foundation Rescue Supply team has industry knowledge that will help make your life easier. You get the tools, the trainings, the systems that you need to move the needle. You want your sales team to close more leads? Done, because they have the proven process for that. You need your crews to work smarter, not harder? Done. Their installation training will get you out there and rocking and rolling in the field. With Foundation Rescue Supply, you're not just buying materials here. You're buying a better business system that they have helped create. and you sell more, you install more, and you grow your team. So the bottom line is this: you get best industry pricing, you get field productivity on track, and you get more revenue out of everybody on your team. So this is your chance to step up, scale up, and thrive. If you are ready to make that happen, head to foundationrescuesupply.com, check out their catalog, and speak to my friends, their team, how you can take beyond the products with your company with Foundation Rescue Supply.
Well, the first mistake that most homeowners make is that they think that soil is a very simple thing. They think that it's all one big mass brown thing below the surface, and that, soil is soil, right? Parts is parts. No, soil is very complicated. It's laid down in layers over millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years. Each of those layers has a different mineral content, a different affinity to water, different density. The layers are not uniform. They're fat on one side and skinny on the other and disappear, and there's rocks in there, and water moves through each of those layers at different rates. Soil can be super, super complicated, which is why we have geotechnical engineers, right? Geotechnical engineers understand the geology of an area. They know how the soils were laid down over what periods of time. They know what they consist of. They put borings in it all the time and sample it. So they understand these things way better. And you could have lots of things going on one house all at the same time. You could have settlement on one end and heave on the other end and all kinds of everything in between. It's complicated, and homeowners don't appreciate that. They don't realize how complicated things can be.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bob, I know Terry won't proclaim this for himself, but he is a self-proclaimed chemical engineer. But chemical engineers nudge up against brewmasters and beer drinkers all day, every day. So, we're starting to see that blurred line between sales inspector and self-proclaimed engineer when it's like, hey, no, that's a whole other degree there, which I love that you're kind of taking the blurred lines and starting to delineate them. And
right.
I think we talked about this recently, like you're finding more and more of an interest for spatial vision, which you haven't even gotten into. We're going to get into that here. I want to get into that next, Bob. But you're starting to break into like the home inspector engineer realm as well, which I think is powerful because even we see it where engineers, like they go out there and do their diagnosing, but they're also like, this is the based assumption that I see based on the data that I have at the given moment, and this is my professional suggestion.
Well, let me just talk about engineers for a second, because most engineers are not qualified to do this kind of work. And the first engineer that everybody calls is the wrong kind. They always want to call a structural engineer.
Yeah,
I got cracks in my structure. You got to call a structural engineer, right? But if you think about it, all the problems from these foundation movement is caused from the soil underneath it. And it's really a geotechnical thing. So if you ask a structural engineer, well, is the house going to keep moving? He's going to go, you got to call a geotech engineer, And that's really what people want to know. I mean, if you've got cracks in your house and it's all done moving, just patch them up and be done with it, right? What you want to know is it going to continue to move? And is it going to continue to cause problems? Is it going to get worse, right? That's what a geotechnical engineer can do. And most geotechnical engineers don't even do residential work. And of the ones that do, almost none of them do forensics. What do I mean by forensics? A forensic, if you go to a police lab, where there's dead bodies and stuff, they're going to be cutting into it and doing forensics, right? Or if you, in the middle of a big lawsuit and they send in the forensic accountants, to dig up all the dirt on you, right? You get what you're in for. So a forensic engineer is an engineer that specializes in doing work on existing structures, on existing conditions. And the fact of the matter is, most engineers don't engage in forensics. So if you ask them, hey, do you do forensics? They're like, oh, yeah, I've done forensics. What they mean is, a couple of times I've done it, nah, that doesn't count. That doesn't work. By the way, on my directory, I have a website, foundationrepairsecrets.com, and I have a directory where people can look up engineers for free anywhere for any state in the nation. And the fact of the matter is, I've talked to a good number of these. They'll say, yeah, we do foundation repair engineering. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you do for foundation repair engineering? And they're like, well, contractors call us and we submit a plan for piering.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like Dave Ramsey, which, he has his preferred providers for cash management and investment management and accounting. You're becoming that for the dirt world.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. So the problem is that most of these engineers, they think foundation repair engineering is doing a spacing plan for permits. Well, guess what? That's not really what's needed. I mean, let's be honest, Will, how hard is it to do a spacing plan? I think I could train a monkey to do it. It's not hard. And, if anything, it's WL8 square over 2, right? WR squared 8 over 2.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the weight that's the problem. It's the span of the stem and footing. And this is another problem I have with some of the repair guys out there. They're actually telling the homeowner, oh, don't worry, because when we submit this for plans, the engineer's going to look it all over and make sure it's right. Not true. That is a bald-faced lie. That will never happen. And the reason it will never happen is because if the engineer did not gather the data, or someone who works on a non-commissioned basis under his direct control gather the data, he cannot use the data. He cannot comment on it. He cannot opine on it. He cannot make a plan based on it. He can lose his license for doing those things. And so cannot happen. Absolutely will not happen. He might make some comment verbally, in hopes that he never gets held accountable for it, but he cannot really do it. The fact of the matter is, the real engineering work requires gathering the data up front and making sure that we have the right problem identified and that we have the right solution for that problem. Now, in North Carolina, for example, the Board of Technical Registration has a rule that the contractor cannot present anything to the homeowner unless it's been sealed by an engineer first. Now, I don't know how many contractors actually do that. I know some are, but I don't know how much it's followed.
Yeah, and knowing that from North Carolina, and you know that, Bob, it is one of those where it's highly regarded, but very loosely followed.
Enforced.
Adhered to.
And enforced.
Bob, what caused you to come up with SpatialVision, and what is it?
All right, SpatialVision. So when I developed our engineering team, we wanted to do it in a very efficient way. We're competing with free, right? We can't be charging like $3,000 to go into a homeowner's home and do an investigation. That doesn't compete with free, right? And so we thought, okay, well, our good friend Henry Ford, how did he make things inexpensive? By division of labor, assembly line.
Huh.
And so we figured out the same thing. Hey, we don't want engineers tromping around on site doing grunt work. That's not what they're good at. And it's not the best use of their time. So we decided we're just going to take people, we're going to train the heck out of them how to gather the data, and we're going to solve all the problems so that the engineers will feel comfortable accepting that data. And it took us about 10 years to come up with a really good system where we didn't have like constant problems. I think we made every mistake in the world doing this. And it took us a long time to solve all the problems. And, sometimes the problems happen early, sometimes the problems happen later. But eventually, through the problem solving process, we ironed them all out. And we arrived at this software platform that basically accounts for 95%. So for example, the inspector is saying, hey, it's a truss roof system. And we're like, dude, this was built in 1956. So like, where's the pictures of the truss? So we require, okay, you can't just make a claim. You have to provide documented evidence that the engineer can stake his license believing, right? Okay, so it's a post-tension slab and the front porch is monolithic with the house. Okay, show the picture of the transition on the side, on the edge of the slab, where it transitions from the house to the slab, and we can see if there's a joint in there or not, right? And if there's a joint, then it's not a post-tension slab. Or if there isn't a joint, then we know that, okay, it's probably monolithic then, right? So those kinds of things. Okay, you're claiming that there's no rebar in the stem wall. Well, show us the picture of the instrument, the readout, the timestamp picture of the readout of the instrument on the stem wall that shows that there's no rebar or that there is or whatever. You're saying that there's a probe and the probe is showing no spread footing below the house. Well, okay, show us a picture of the probe pushed to depth and, and nothing there, right? So, because quite often we found that sometimes just human nature, people fudge things. Oh, I forgot to do this. Well, I'm just going to say it's this, No, we engineers want to feel confident that something's right. So there needs to be documentation.
Now, Bob, that brings up an interesting segue. My background's in construction. So if you were to build a foundation for a residential home, what system would you be employing anywhere in the country?
Well, that's a very difficult question, and it's very loaded. Part of it depends on where you're at. So, like, for instance, in the Southwest and the South, you're going to have primarily slabs on grade. The farther north you go, you're going to run into more crawl spaces and more basements, just simply because you got frost line, right? And you got to have frost heave. You got to go down to the frost line. If you're digging down 3, 4 feet, 5 feet for frost line, you might as well just keep on digging a little bit more and put in a basement, right? You're not going to do that in Phoenix very often, right? So the fact of the matter is, a lot of it depends. Now, in Arizona, they have what they call a uniform thickness post-tension slab. They started building these about 2003.
Yeah, I remember when these started coming into the market. Yeah,
Yep.
I forgot about the.
Yeah, not a huge fan of these. And the reason is because there's very little edge protection. They only stick down into the soil about 6 inches. And by the way, that 6 inches is 6 inches of fill that's put in after the house is built. So water penetrates it very easily and goes right underneath the foundation. I mean, think about it. The original post-tension slab had ribs, kind of like a waffle going both directions, right? And inside the beams of the waffle, there would be cables top and bottom that would restrain it, right? Well, now, instead of that, we have one cable right in the middle. Well, engineers call the middle the neutral zone. It doesn't resist bending at all. It resists stretching, but not bending. And so the uniform thickness post-tension slab, in my opinion, has a number of flaws that can be problematic over time. Now, if you're not in expansive soil, it's probably no big deal, right? But if you do have expansive soils, it can be problematic.
So are you more inclined to go with a traditional rebar reinforced system?
I guess if I was going to build me a house today, I probably would do that. The problem with rebar is that it doesn't have any kind of cathodic protection. So if you have water that infiltrates into the concrete, which easily happens, right? Because there's millions of pores in concrete. When was the last time you saw water beat up on a sidewalk, right? No, it soaks in. And as it soaks in, because of the carbonic acid in the rain, it changes the pH level of the concrete from a alkaline to an acidic pH level. And as soon as it does that, then it starts to generate a small chemical electrical current that it basically facilitates the corrosion of any steel embeds. And I think eventually, someday, I think all embeds are going to be made out of composites. They just got to figure out how to manufacture them cheap enough. I think you can get fiberglass rebar now for about the same price as steel rebar. So I think it's already starting to happen. But a typical steel embed in concrete is problematic. Now, the nice thing about post-tension is that the cables are plastic, right? And they've got even encapsulations on the ends that protect it from corrosion. So they've thought it through carefully from a corrosion standpoint. And we don't see too many problems with the properly encapsulated post-tension system. It's some of the older ones that weren't encapsulated that have some of the problems.
I'm glad you brought that up, Bob, because we are seeing like this massive transition in construction where it's like rebar, 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 but now we're seeing this fiberglass and composite product coming onto the market in waves. We see it used all the time in ICF. And of course, in construction, we're a little slow to adopt the way of doing things.
Or the engineers are slow.
Yeah, exactly. But I tell you, like, I am totally pumped about the new composite rebar products because what it's doing just only for storage, shelf life, maintenance, corrosion has been just top shelf. And I am pumped about it. So
Yep. It's going to be the way of the future, no doubt about it. And even now, I mean, if you have a number 3 fiberglass bar, that's actually stronger than a number 4 steel bar in tension, not in shear. But you'll see there are other really innovative products coming on board. You have carbon fiber bars. You also have, what's the basaltic bars made out of basalt, believe it or not, which is basically lava rock.
That's pretty cool.
It's pioneered out of Russia, of all weird places, but it's sort of positioned price-wise between fiberglass and carbon fiber, and I think is relatively easy to find the materials to make. Now, I don't know how easy the process is, but I think it could make a difference somewhere down the road in terms of cost effectiveness.
Yeah. Well, I want to do a little bit of a 180 here because then we kind of nerded out. And Bob, every time we get together, we start nerding out about dirt and rebar and Terry's drinking habits, including my own. And anyway, so like let's revert back to SpatialVision because it's a very visual product.
It is.
But honestly, most people think of visual products as being solely customer facing. But it's not only that, it's helping like my inspectors, but also it's helping like the install team and understanding what's going on. So like you're getting, and you've just experienced mine, but like when you look around the country from like before and after, what are the biggest changes you're seeing in companies after instituting SpatialVision? And I would encourage people to go to the website. I want to know the specific link here in a little bit, but what's the biggest transition you've been seeing with SpatialVision in like the first 90 days in a company?
You kind of mentioned it right off the bat. The big draw for contractors is, frankly, their ability to communicate with the customer. That's the first big draw. We call it the holy shit moment because, when you present this 3D model, this colored 3D model to the homeowner, they can see it immediately. They're like, oh, I got to deal with this, So that's the first basic benefit. The fact of the matter is, though, there are some other really great benefits. When you're training new guys and you want them to understand what's going on, the time spent in training new sales reps or new inspectors and how to interpret the problem is dramatically cut down. I don't know how many times you've had it, but we would get out in the field and our supervisor on the foreman crew would say, I don't agree with this. I don't think this is the right plan. I think we need to change it here. We need to change it there. We need to make some adjustments, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's a lot easier to get everybody on the same page when you have a 3D colored model, because now you can easily see where the problems are, where they stop, where they start. Oh, and you got a big hump in the middle. Well, that's from heave. And so that area kind of in between that and the settlement, well, that doesn't really need piers because it's part of the heave, right? So it's easier to sort out those kinds of problems with your field guys. And how many times have you heard field guys go, oh, friggin' sales guys, they got it wrong again, now we have to go tell the homeowner there's a change order. How many times have you heard that? A billion, right? This eliminates 90% of all those problems because everybody gets on the same page immediately. They can see the problem, they can understand it better, and there's less of that, well, I think this, well, no, I think that, kind of thing.
Well, Bob, I want to be very clear. That never happens in my company ever. It has never happened a single day.
Yeah, I got some land in Idaho too, man.
Yeah. Oh. So hold on. So I love the visuals on it. Now I got to segue a little bit because, you obviously grew a successful company. And you exited that company, as many people never think about that. So, and by the way, before we even get into this, SpatialVision specifically, how do people access it? Where do they go?
You can go to our website, Foundation Repair Secrets, and sign up for a free demo.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it Ted that's there at your company?
Zach.
Zach. That's it.
Yeah, Zach does all the training. He's a good guy.
Yeah. Awesome product. It's one of those where I want to make sure, I mean, the saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
For sure.
I don't even know what a 3D rendering that you can spin around is worth, but I mean, it's
probably another 10 times that.
Yeah. Well, not only that, for just the capital investment in a project and the ROI. So I'm excited to get that, to get people involved in that. But
we've had sales guys increase their sales by as much as 30% by using this.
Wow. That's great. Now, why is that? Why are they increasing their sales 30% because of that?
It's, when you present a 3D colored model to the homeowner that shows it diving off on one side, really visually, you don't even have, you're not trying to explain that, oh, these numbers, they're lower than those numbers. So that means you need a, no, you don't have to do any of that. You just show them the picture and they're like, oh shit, I need to fix that.
Yeah. Well, they don't need an engineering degree to understand that visual.
Right.
You know, if it's an engineering report,
Right.
they're going to have to understand all the terminology in it. The picture, you can see where the flaws are at.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where I think as we bring on younger generations into the trade, we need simplicity and we need clarity. And
Right.
technology is doing that for us. I mean, it's super, super cool. And I still see contractors out there strolling around in carbon copied, like double print paper.
Yeah. Using a 4-foot level, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it's like, there's 2025, like, anyway.
So, speaking of which, let me tell you, we have a really cool add-on to our software. If you use a smart level and you have the drawing already outlined, you can put the staff and hit the spot on the drawing and it puts the elevation in automatically. You don't even have to like type a number in.
Wow, that's cool. That's exciting. So
Big time saver.
Now, Bob, you exited Arizona Foundation Solutions and you moved into this new chapter. What were some of the lessons that you learned when you were scaling that business and exiting that business?
Well, you mean in terms of exiting the company or the lessons I learned?
Well, yeah. Take us through that process.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, you always want to have more than one buyer. You never want to sell to just one party because they have a process called due diligence. And basically, it's their chance to rake you over the coals is what it amounts to. And they're going to come in and go through the books and they're going to look at everything and they're going to go, oh, well, we don't like this and we don't like that. And we think that we're going to offer you less because, it's not the way it was represented to us. But if you have two buyers, then you just turn around and go, all right, whatever, we'll go to the other buyer. And they're like, wait. No, we didn't mean it that much, So number one, always have more than one buyer. Number two, pay attention to the initial LOI, letter of interest, because what's in the LOI is probably what's going to follow all the way down. And if you don't get it in the initial LOI, you're not going to get it later on. So those are two pieces of advice that I would encourage everybody to look at.
Well, Bob, we could actually do a whole other episode with, and I would actually love that to have you and a few others that have had
Sure.
successful exits in their business. We should do a panel at some point in the future because we could dive into that so much because it's a complex world. And most of us, we're just in our businesses grinding away and we forget, oh, holy cow, like you mean this is worth money? Sure,
Yeah.
give me money. And it's like, no, there's a whole lot of decisions to be made.
Well, and one of the advantages that I had is that I had a board of advisors. I had like 10 guys that had successfully exited their companies for a lot more than I got for mine. We're talking big heavy hitters at this point, into the hundreds of millions. They were invaluable to me. They guided me. They kept me from making stupid mistakes. And I'm just not talking about for the exit. I'm talking about, for 30 years prior to the exit. These were really, really helpful guys, and they really made a difference for me. And they were instrumental in helping me exit properly.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, Bob, I did not prep you for this last question.
It's all right.
So I want you to get ready.
Okay.
So we ask all of our guests, and many people, Terry, and Bob probably even knows this, because Bob knows my wife, Sydney, that I am the patron saint of screwing things up. And I have made a lot of screw ups in business. I try to get to the point now where I screw it up so bad I can laugh about it and own it like a Texan, as they say. So what's a screw up you made in business in the past that hopefully somebody listening to this, our 5 listeners, can at least learn from and grow from it?
I'll tell you two. I'll do you one better. I'll tell you two. So the first one was I was doing work for a big home builder, Ingalls Homes, national builder, and we had a large contract to the tune of about $3 million. And it took us like 3 years to do it. It was a lot of work. Well, right in the middle of the contract, they got bought out by a company out of Florida. And guess what? The company out of Florida got sideways with something or other and went through bankruptcy. So I was concerned, okay, are we going to get screwed here? You know, we're in the middle of this job. What do we got to do to take care of ourselves, right? So my board said to me, okay, here's what you do, Bob. You negotiate a letter of credit from their bank for $600,000 that anytime they get more than 48 hours behind in their bill, you can present this letter of credit for $600,000 to their bank. Oh, man. Let me tell you, they never missed a payment. Now, the fallout from that was, here's the irony of it. The fallout was 3 years later, I get a call from the bankruptcy court saying, oh, we feel like you were given an unfair advantage and we want you to pay $40,000 back to us. And I had to fly to Florida, hire an attorney in Florida, and go fight this thing. And they basically said to me, yeah, you know, you probably didn't do anything wrong, but it's going to cost you $40,000 to defend this. So why don't you just pay us the $40,000 to be done? And in the end, that's what I had to do because I knew he was right. I would spend more than $40,000 defending myself with the Florida attorney. So that was one thing.
Hold on, Bob. I got to be very clear. You got to watch out for those Florida people because Terry is a Florida person, and we don't even call them Floridians now. We call them Florida people. By the way, Terry, where are you from exactly in Florida?
North Central Florida, right outside of Gainesville.
Okay, where did you have to fly to, Bob?
I don't even remember where it was in Florida, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you know what? Shady people. Terry.
Yeah.
Right there.
You know, it's sort of like the people of Walmart, right? The people of Florida.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Second thing, this one is much more consequential. I actually wrote a blog about this recently on insurance claims. So I had a job early in my career back in 2006, and it was for a commercial project up in the mountains of northern Arizona in a town called Sholo. And they had a 10-foot retaining wall that they wanted me to underpin while they dug below it to add on. Well, I didn't really understand at the time how the processes worked in commercial work. I just figured it was the same as residential. Oh, big mistake. You know, I didn't know what an engineered submittal was. I didn't even know there was such a thing, right? So I just submitted my plan to the architect and the engineer, and they got on the phone and said, yeah, it looks good to me. Of course, then they later denied saying that, right? And so this wall had a little deck on top of it with a lip above that held all the water in with drains. And the drains went down into the soil and out the wall, but the wall where they came out was taped up. They never untaped them from original construction, and they put stick-on stones on top of them. So all the water got injected behind the wall. Well, we had tiebacks, we had everything in there, and in a big rainstorm, you know, they have what they call a monsoon storm here, 2 inches of water in a half hour. The whole wall, 300 foot long, collapsed. The entire thing fell. And at the time, I bought an insurance policy that the agent claimed didn't have an earth movement exclusion, but it did have one. Ugh. So my insurance company filed a notice that we are not going to cover this claim. We're talking millions and millions of dollars. At that point, I decided, you know what? I can't trust the insurance company. I can't trust their attorney. I can't trust their experts. So I hired my own. I hired my own expert and my own attorney, and they proved that it was not earth movement that caused the failure. It was water getting back behind where it shouldn't have got, and it was water caused problem, and the insurance had to cover it.
Oh, man.
It took me 5 years to fight that one out, but I finally ended up winning that battle. And the big lesson that I learned there was how important engineering was. At the time, I was like a typical, foundation repair contractor. We don't need no stinking engineers. I'm smarter than an engineer. Dunning-Kruger syndrome, right? All that, right? Well, guess what? I learned very quickly how important engineering was. And from then on, I became a believer.
Well, I think you did two things there, Bob. You understood more about engineering, but also like as contractors, especially smaller contractors, they're hesitant to call the attorney
Right.
for help because it's like, oh, this person's an ambulance chaser and they're just going to charge
Right.
me up. And it's like, no. Good attorneys are worth their weight in gold.
For sure. I've got an attorney. I've had him for 30 years. And I'm going to tell you right now, I have never, not one time, lost with him. He is really sharp and he has saved my bacon so many times.
So hold on. I think I know this attorney. What's your attorney's name? Is it Johnny Cochran? I'm just kidding. Hey,
Wrong area of law, I'm afraid.
no, I'm just teasing you. Bob, I love what you do. I love what you do for our industry. I love what you're starting to innovate because, typically, to be fair, when somebody sells a business, they go out there and they live it up on the beach or wherever you go. But no, you're continuing to push not only the contractors, the suppliers, and the engineering community, which I think is just so cool. And I hope I've got the same energy as you when I get to your age. I mean, you're only 42. I'm right
Yeah,
behind
that's
you
great.
at 41.
Yeah, sure.
But otherwise, how do people get a hold of you? This is the most important thing because it's like you've got a lot of website products out there. So if you search Bob Brown Dirt Whisperer, you pop up. But
Yeah, I'm sure I'll pop up. Foundation Repair Secrets is the easiest to remember. Bob@tanksville.com is my email address. I get people contacting me all over the country needing help, and I usually just help them for free.
well, and you're very outspoken on social media, specifically like Facebook groups of structural repair, foundation repair groups, geotechnical foundation repair groups, or geotechnical engineering groups. Like you're very active on those, and I'm sure they don't even know who you are.
Right.
But like it's like if you just click on his profile, you'll get a whole encyclopedia of who you are.
Yeah, right.
Bob, I am pumped that you've been on us. We'll put some links into the show comments here or the show description. Otherwise, thank you for chiseling out the time to be with us this afternoon. Terry,
Yep.
Thank you for consuming more of our podcast paid beer. Just
Always
to be
good.
clear, so everybody that's listening, like Terry gets the beer every other time, and then during the week in between episodes, I slowly consume the beer, and then he gets here and he goes, "Where the hell did all the beer go?"
Yep.
And I still have no clue where it goes. No clue.
You got to feed the animals at the zoo.
Yeah. So if any of you are thinking about starting a podcast and monetizing it, do not introduce beer or alcohol to it because that'll eat up all your profits. But anyway, to you 5 or 6 listeners out there, we appreciate you guys. We love you guys coming back every week. We'll see you next week on another episode of Beers with Contractors. Appreciate you guys.
See ya.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beers with Contractors. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, a friendly reminder. Beers with Contractors encourages responsible drinking. If you choose to enjoy a beverage during our time together, please do so in moderation and only if you're of legal drinking age in your country or state. Furthermore, the advice and insights shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Always consult with professionals and experts in your field, and be sure to follow local laws and regulations regarding licensing and permits. We're here to help, entertain, and inspire, but your safety and compliance are important. So, as you head out into the world of construction and contracting, remember to build responsibly and make decisions that stand the test of time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode of Beers with Contractors. Until then, cheers to your success.